Hi, everyone. How do you do today? So the biggest tech hub in the world is Lisbon. I think the discussion is closed. We can go now, right? I'm joking. OK. We are talking about emerging tech hubs today. Next Silicon Valley, do we actually need a new Silicon Valley? What does tech hub exactly mean for us as people who are globetrotters, for those who spend maybe the majority of our times online? My first question to you is your personal Marco Polo story, please. Where have you lived? Where have you traveled? What similarities and what differences do you see between different continents and between different tech hubs that you've encountered in your professional and private lives?
Sure, should I go first? So, Laura González-Estéfani, I'm originally from Madrid. I have lived in Barcelona. I have lived in the UK, in Ireland, in the Bay Area many years. I moved to from the Bay Area to Miami 7 years ago. That is where I live now. That's where I call home. Similarities and, and differences. I would say that the Bay Area is very approachable. Anyone is willing to help you. There's no hierarchy. People see you and they fall in love with you, with your vision, if you're looking for funding. There's a lot of entrepreneurs willing to help you. If you go to Miami, boom, it's a huge mix of people melting pot from all over the world, entrepreneurs of all ages, people from Latin America, from the US, Europeans discovering and willing to build something new. We have a lot to learn in Miami right now. It has only 10 years old of an ecosystem. If you come to Europe, very conservative in many ways. Look at all the suits that are all around here. I was amazed coming from the farm to here. Sorry for the ones wearing a suit, but I mean, you see that kind of like there's still regulation and people are uptight and, we need a little entrepreneurs building from here to the world to really kind of like make things easier. People are not as approachable. Huge bureaucracy is still in Europe in many ways. So I believe that the next tech place will be a place where people can be who they are. They can build whatever they want. They get the support they need from the different partners, investors, ecosystem builders, etc. And it doesn't matter. We don't need another Silicon Valley. Why do we need to replicate? I think that each of the cities have their own personality. And I am now in Miami. What can I say?
Thank you, Laura. Zach.
Hi, so my name's Zach Colias. I'm originally from Minnesota, which is not really a tech hub by any stretch, but I moved to the Bay Area in 2005. So I've seen this incredible growth in the Bay Area. I mean, it went from, literally the ice ages of the post.com crash to, now the insanity of, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of tech washing all over it. And then I've seen it really come down. I mean, it's, in a lot of ways, the energy that was all centered in the Bay Area has now scattered all over the world. So whether it's Miami or Lisbon or Kosovo or any hub, that energy has moved out, and now there's just amazing innovation happening all over the world. And I think that's incredibly exciting, because in a lot of ways, what's happened in the Bay Area is there's a lot of groupthink. A lot of people think the same way. They go to the same parties, they play the same games, they think the same things, and it makes things really boring. And so I'm personally very excited about all the new ideas that are showing up from people all over the world. It's just incredibly cool.
Thank you, Zach. Oscar, tell us your story.
So I also come from Madrid. So funny enough, we met here, living in different continents and sitting next to each other. But for the last 15 years, I've been living in Asia. I've been living in China, where I've seen the evolution of a tech ecosystem, where when I arrived there, you couldn't pay anything online. You need to have somebody to come to you, and you pay cash to that person. And today is a market where probably has one of the most advanced fintech ecosystems that you can see. What do I see in terms of similarities across the world? I'm based in China, I'm based in Shanghai, but I actually invest globally. China represents a small part of my investment. Just in the last 2 months, I've invested in companies across India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Colombia, so literally everywhere. So I have the luck to be able to work with people individually, one-on-one, but also to have people working together. And one of the key things that I believe is the most important and the most surprising is that entrepreneurs are just a different breed. different type of people, and you'll see more similarities. It's impressive when you see people that they come from very different cultures, other sides of the world, that they can understand each other easily. So I think that's kind of like similarities. When you talk about differences, about ecosystems, I think expectations are clearly a major difference. What are the expectations? What are the alternative options? What do you want to do, the change? In emerging markets, in general, everything is there to be built. There's no legacy infrastructure. You can do something, and you are not improving health. You are creating health services because there's nothing there. So that's what I see as a really big difference if I compare ecosystems in more developed markets and emerging markets.
Amazing, thank you very much. Just to put myself in context, so I'm living in a very small Italian village. I don't even call it a city. It's like 7,000. And I'm the only one from my company because my company, Cointelegraph, is based in over 30 countries. So it's truly decentralized. It means that if we were to bring all the people in one place, we actually would lose all our value. Because our value is that we are not biased with the place where we are based, but that we are able to look through the eyes of others because we have this diverse team from all over the world. So my next question to you is, you've all mentioned, we've seen, so the vision is very important. Do we actually need to move, or is it enough to just see, experience, and then maybe bring the best to the place where you live? And what's the role of digital space in all this balance?
Yeah, so one thing we've seen, I have about 60 companies in my personal portfolio, and some of them have moved to the Bay Area and some have not. And they're companies all over the world, so people in Poland, in Mexico, in all over Canada. And it used to be, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, if you wanted to start a tech company, you really needed to move to a tech hub. So whether it was the Bay Area or New York or somewhere in Europe that has a lot of concentration of people. And in the last couple of years, that's just no longer true. So when entrepreneurs are asking me for advice, my suggestion is you should go where your network is, where your support system is, where your infrastructure has been built, and then you can recruit talent from all over the world, because now with remote work, you can really hire people from anywhere. And you really don't gain a lot when you move to a new city. You don't know anybody. You don't know how the systems work. You're brand new. It's going to take a few years to build up that infrastructure. On the other hand, if you're a young person and you're not trying to start a company and you just want to go join like the movement that is tech, I highly recommend moving to a tech hub, because the serendipity of being in the same room as people who are starting companies is incredibly powerful. So when I started, my poker games had the founders of Airbnb and Dropbox and Uber sitting there right next to me playing quarter 50-cent poker. None of us knew how big they would become. It was just a bunch of guys hanging out having fun. And that serendipity has changed my life. So my recommendation to any young entrepreneurs, if you can find ways to get close to that serendipity, you're going to be in a great place.
I like this diplomatic way of answering the question. So,
Yeah.
to move or not to move?
Yeah, so I'm going to share a little story. So I was the first employee of Facebook in Europe back in the day, 2008. I had 2 children back in the day. We were raising our Series C, and the office was my house. My boss was in Silicon Valley, and the office was my house in Alcobendas in Madrid. So did it matter? It did not matter back in the day. What it mattered is the brain power. That's what matters. So talent has no zip code. So why, sadly, because of the pandemic, very hard situation for everybody, but we were able to see that you can build the company of your dreams from anywhere in the world as long as you're connected, right? And even today, when I lived in the Bay Area for almost 6 years, I thought, wow, Silicon Valley, this is a mecca. Who was going to say that I was going to? And at the end, it's about building relationships that last through the tools that you have available. Sometimes it's in Palo Alto and you have a quick coffee in Copa Café, or sometimes it's in Alcobendas, in Café Pino, in whatever. You see? And sometimes it's just virtually, which is what we've seen in the last few years. So, as an entrepreneur, I failed my company back in 2000. I eat the bubble big time.
This was Italian.
That's big time. This is very Argentinian, by the way. That's the mix in Miami. But as an entrepreneur, you don't have to move. You just need to make sure that you're going to attract the best talent no matter where they are. If they're in Poland, in Lisbon, in Argentina, in somewhere in Southeast Asia, it doesn't matter, right?
Okay, how do you do that? Do you search it moving around the world, seeing, meeting people, or do you search virtually?
So in our case, it's interesting. We're investing everywhere, but I have 5 portfolio companies in Nigeria, 19 companies in Pakistan, 5 in Bangladesh. I've never been to those markets. I think one person from my team has been in some of these markets ever. So do you need to be present? No, you don't. Then do you need to have a community? So you asked earlier, what's a tech hub? Well, we're talking about that earlier. A tech hub, in my opinion, is a community. And the definition of community is evolving, is changing. So it's no longer like online or offline, it's hybrid. So we will not be able to do what we do without our local partners. In every one of the locations where we do anything, we have local partners that we work with them. And luckily, there's places like these where we can get to meet all of them together. They can collaborate with each other, and suddenly you create kind of organized that. What a community is a network of people with multiple nodes, multiple connections, and that's what needs to happen. No? Entrepreneurs don't just improve things. Entrepreneurs change things in a way that the old system becomes obsolete, and then you do things in a completely different way. So personally, I think the offline part will need to exist. I mean, the fun, the parties, there's a lot of things that will need to exist. Does it need to be exactly the same way it was with like official tech hubs and everybody moving there permanently? I don't think so. I think that's over, and it's gonna evolve. And it's gonna be something different. We'll see. Still, we're in the process of changing.
We talked a little bit about diversity. In my personal opinion, a real tech hub, well, any hub, like brain hub, is about representation. But if you travel around the world, there are places where you can find more Europeans. There are places which are loved by Chinese, and there are places that Americans prefer. There are like, what is the place in the world, in your opinion, right now, that is the most diverse?
Oh, Miami. I'm sorry. Oh, there's no question.
Okay.
Miami right now.
What do you think?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, we live in a super diverse ecosystem. No? I mean, we work in Singapore, and you'll be amazed because by design, Singapore, for example, as a city, is based on the foundation of like a Chinese culture, Malay culture, Indian culture, and those are cultures that sometimes, from a Western perspective, they're not understood. But it's super diverse at the core. And then you have becoming Singapore a hub for the region is attracting people from all over the world. It was actually ruled by the British, so there's a lot of like diversity and a lot of like really interesting melting pot happening there.
Zach?
The internet. The internet is where you find everyone all coming together, and that's where for me anywhere, where the magic is.
Okay, and my alternative is metaverse. Metaversal locations are the most diverse per design. Though it's maybe not the most accessible, we don't have to fly into metaverse, but we have to have the equipment, have the knowledge, have the access. I think in the description of the panel, it was mentioned cloud, so it's like, in my opinion, Web 2 version of metaverse. If we're talking about Web 3 and metaverse, how do you see this concept of tech hub being developed in virtual reality of metaverse?
Well, you know, I think that technology should make our lives easier. And I am the oldest in the panel, and I can tell you that I was pre-internet. I was pre-internet. So, you know, there's this huge wave about the metaverse exists, or however we want to call it, for a very long time. Gaming and all these things have created these virtual worlds where people was able to interact. Now, I love adoption. I love technology that brings, you know, democratizes access for everyone. The metaverse today is not there yet because of the connectivity, because of the device, the gear that you need to wear, because of the end experience. So there's no question that it's going to be another place where we are going to be able to interact in different ways is going to be absolutely compatible with all the different ways of connecting, but I don't think we're going to be talking about one platform wins it all. I think, if we think about when I was with my laptop back in the day and mobile was a technology where it was disrupting our daily lives, it has its place. It's not the only place. You still do things in your laptop, you still do things real life, you still do things on mobile, and now, whenever it's more adaptable to people, we will have the metaverse. So I think that all these crazy kind of like fever around metaverse, we need to land it a little bit down and say, okay, who can access today, and how are we going to live with it as an extra scenario to play with? That's my take. It's not a winner takes all.
Yeah, so on the plane on the way here, I read Tony Fadell's new book called Build. If you haven't read it, by the way, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. So Tony was the guy who basically built the iPod and the iPhone at Apple, and Nest, the smart thermostat. So one of the legends of our business. And he wrote a book about his career, and he talks about how he started his career early on at General Magic, building what was a failed version of the iPhone back in the early 90s. And it took 20 years for the ideas of technologists to turn into reality. And for many years in the early 2000s, everyone used to joke about, oh, it's the year of mobile again. And then suddenly, mobile absolutely wiped out everything as we know it and changed the world that we live in. And so when I look at metaverse, I see the exact same thing. Like the technology curve of metaverse, we're actually not that far away from a world where you put on something and it feels like reality. It feels like you are in a different place and you can't even tell the difference. And so that world will so dramatically change the user interface that we have today of these little tiny shitty rectangular screens where we're like trying to poke on these little buttons, and it's only a few years away. So as an entrepreneur and as an investor, when I look at the exciting things, you just have to get a couple years in front of that curve, and that's where a lot of the fun is. So I'm personally incredibly excited about it. I think we're getting really close.
I think it's all about what is the definition of the metaverse. I mean, the year 2000, I was a developer working in open source projects, and I was working with people from all over the world already, like more than 20 years ago. We were using mailing lists. That was the thing that we were using. But I had like a really good time, like talking with people, sharing things in a different way because that was our expectation. Now, well, there is an expectation of a richer type of environment. But even today, you still have Zoom calls or whatever where people's like, oh, can you hear me? Can you see the presentation? So I think the problem is not the bottleneck is not going to be a technology. I think the bottleneck is the attitude, is the philosophy, is the way people think about interaction only in a virtual way. And I believe we have already passed that. And for a lot of technology adoption, it's not really the technology problem. It's always the user problem.
I would argue that I think that's what makes it so interesting, is that the technology usually iterates on a relatively predictable curve. Like we can look at it and be like, okay, we need this level of DPI, we need this level of refresh rate, and the technology is going to do X. But humans and human behavior operates on these non-linear curves. Like it'll literally be a step function change. I remember early on when Travis was first starting Uber, he and I had this giant debate about whether or not it would work. And I was like, there's no fucking way. The taxi unions are going to crush you. It's just not going to happen. And literally, the nonlinear curve that he demonstrated and was just unbelievable because human adoption was like, boom, and it just changed everything. And so I think it's really interesting that where we sit, we can look at this metaverse and be like, what's going to happen? But it's going to happen way faster than we anticipate, but not when we anticipate. So it's this really weird interaction there. It just makes it so exciting.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned mobile as an example earlier, no? And I remember I was working in the early deployments of 3G,
yeah.
where for the first time we're going to have video calls.
Yeah.
Nobody ever used that.
Well, I was at eBay when eBay acquired Skype.
Nobody ever used
imagine.
that. But then there were things like Skype, and today, like everybody's doing video calls all the time.
Yeah.
And they were trying to do like a technology push to make that happen. I mean, I think needs to be like a demand from the user side. It's basically like entrepreneurship 101.
Yeah, adoption.
I mean, don't build it if users don't need it.
Exactly.
And I think that's going to happen with the metaverse.
Let me engage the audience a little bit. How many of you have lived in more than one city?
Nice. Come to Miami, guys.
Laura, you are also.
Oh, yes, sorry.
How many of you have lived in more than one country? How many of you live in a place different from where your company is based? How many of you speak more than one language? So my last very quick question to you. You both live in an English-speaking country, well, maybe Spanish a bit, right?
Yeah, Spanglish.
Okay. What's the language of the emerging tech hubs? Should it be English, or is it something else? Short answer.
You know, I think I was saying before, and maybe it sounds a little bit cheesy, but the beauty is where you feel where you can be yourself, and you're going to be surrounded by people that speaks Espanol, people that speaks Portuguese, people that speaks, you know, I think it's important that the United States of America for me is not home. It's not Spain anymore. So you need to be there, you need to mingle and bond with the culture and learn and try to bring the best of you to the country and take the best of the country for you. And you become yourself and my kids melting little pots of all those learnings. So I wouldn't say you have to speak English or you have to be yourself and give the best of yourself to the country where you're living. And I think that's the most
Oscar,
important thing.
do you speak
Chinese?
Chinese?
I speak Chinese. So in my daytime, in normal days, I speak Chinese, English, and Spanish. If you want to do things in China, you want to do things in certain parts of Asia, like Malaysia, Singapore, Chinese will help out a lot. Most of Asia you can manage with English. I think I have the impression that most of Europe you can manage with English, but I don't have a lot of exposure to Europe. In Latin America, I'm finding that Spanish opens a lot of doors. For me, the real test is what language is people using in the WeChat groups, WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups. My Chinese groups are in Chinese. My Asian groups are all in English. European groups are all in English, but the Spanish one is in Spanish. But I will see if I join the Portuguese one or the French one.
Zach, your picked language?
The good news is this is the language of the future right here. It already basically will translate in real time. You put in an earbud, and you can speak whatever language you want to me.
So code. Code is the language of the tech hubs. Just a small anecdote. I'm actually studying Arabic now. So I went to one of the emerging tech hubs, that is Dubai, in hopes that I will practice Arabic. Have I? No. Everybody is speaking English. Well, I found some local Dubai people who still prefer to talk to me in English. Anyway, a big round of applause to all of you.
Thank you.
Diverse and amazing audience, and to our amazing panelists, and to the organizers. And see you somewhere else, and also in Lisbon, obviously.
Thank you.